biggest nation on earth, to get this terrible war to a conclusion. But again, I'm really reluctant to discuss all kinds of specific elements, because me doing that in an official press conference would add complexity to the peace talks. So you have to accept that I'm speaking a little bit blurred on this and not as open as I would like to do. On the first issue, when it comes to airspace violations in Moldova, I can assure you that NATO and Moldova, and also countries like Romania, who is of course very close to Moldova, are closely coordinating with Moldova on this situation. Of course, we're trying to be maximum helpful and also clearly signaling to the Russians that this is reckless and unacceptable.
Okay, and just next to her in the second row, Anadolu.
Hello, Turkish News Agency Anadolu, Melike Pala. While peace talks too and the war in Ukraine going on, we are also seeing that countries strengthen their military policies, such as extending service duration, considering mandatory conscription for all men, and also increasingly including women in mobilization plans. Some European countries have already revised actually their laws to include women in conscription or pre-mobilization training, and others are signaling similar intention. So I wonder, how do you see this trend? Does it reflect preparation to secure long-term peace in Europe, or a response to potential future conflicts? Thank you.
Well, when it comes to making sure that our militaries are to the max prepared for the situation at hand, and we know at the moment that Russia is spending about 40% of its state budget on defense, about $200 billion a year, and their purchasing power with the 200 billion is higher than we in Europe because of a different construction of our economies. They spend about 10% of their GDP now on defense. So given that fact and the rapid build-up of the Russian armed forces means that we have to react, and that is the 5% defense pledge, including 3.5% spent on core defense, and that has to do, of course, with men and women in uniform, but also with making sure that the defense industrial base can deliver the output necessary, like your defense industrial base in Turkey. There are over 3,000 companies, part of that defense industrial base, delivers the output to make sure that we can deter and defend. But then it is up to each nation to decide, how do we get enough men and women in uniform? So you will have some nations with conscription, you will have some nations with models which are discussing conscription or make it more voluntary, like for example the recent decisions in Germany. Germany, I understand, there is a constraint by the constitution to also make that offer to the women, the young women in Germany. We see in Norway that in the meantime now 1 in 3 men and women in uniform in Norway are women. So this is rapidly building up. But in the end, it's up to each nation. What we will look at consistently is our nations delivering what they promised to do when it comes to interoperability, command and control, and when it comes to your specific question, the capability targets, including the size of the armed forces and industrial output. And of course the money spent on that. But then those specific decisions are up to each country.
Okay, we have time for a few more. We'll go to the fourth row on the aisle.
Union, Ukraine, Dmytro Klitschko. Let's imagine the negotiations break down, both sides continue fighting, and USA stops supplying weapons to Ukraine even for money. Do you have a plan B for this? Thank you.
Well, I do not. No, I don't think that plan B we have to think about. Because the US is very consistent in support for Ukraine, like all NATO allies are very consistent. Of course, what the US told us is we want to supply Ukraine with the necessary weapons, both lethal and non-lethal, but we expect Europeans and Canadians to step up when it comes to the paying for it, and that's this Pearl program, where the US is delivering the necessary weapons, including the air defense systems and the PAC-3 missiles for the Patriot systems, but also for the other air defense systems, and all the other stuff and all the military gear you need to stay as strong as possible in the fight, paid for by European and Canadian allies. And that is the big program which started in July, and at the moment already 4 billion, and I think by the end of the year 5 billion of that supply will have been delivered to Ukraine, critical material. But I have no reason to think that we have to prepare for those eventualities.
Okay, third row in the center here.
Mikhail Kalinin, The
Hello.
Insider, Russian media in exile.